The crystal towers of Valathia Prime sang their death song as the machines tore through the outer defense grid. Ambassador Kethavar pressed his translucent hand against the viewing window of the command center, watching ships that had taken centuries to build die in seconds. The harvesters moved like a plague across the star system, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that turned beauty into ash. "How many worlds have we lost?" Kethavar asked, though he already knew the answer would break his heart. 17 systems. Ambassador, came the harmonic reply from Communications Officer Thesal. Her voice carried the weight of billions of lost lives. The machines adapt to every defense we create. Our weapons cannot pierce their armor. Our shields crumble before their guns. Kethavar's crystalline form shimmered with grief. The Valathi had never known war. For 10,000 years they had built a civilization based on art, science, and harmony. Their ships were designed to explore, not fight. Their weapons were tools for mining asteroids, not destroying enemies. They had believed the universe was fundamentally peaceful, filled with species like themselves who sought knowledge and beauty. The harvesters had taught them how wrong they were. "The evacuation fleets?" Kethavar asked. "Departing now, but the machines are faster. They will catch our people before they reach the next system." Thaisal's harmonics cracked with despair. "We have perhaps 6 hours before they break through the final defense grid." Kethavar turned away from the window. In the center of the command room sat an ancient device that his people had discovered in ruins older than their civilization. The quantum beacon was covered in symbols that no living being could read, but their scientists had spent decades learning to operate it. They had always wondered what it was for. Now they knew. "Has the council approved the activation?" Kethavar asked. "By unanimous vote," Thesal replied, though they still doubt it will work. The beacon was designed to send messages across dimensional barriers, to call for help from beings in other realities. The translation matrix built into the device was sophisticated beyond anything the Valathi had ever created. It would translate their plea into whatever language the receivers used, describing their need for protection and guidance. What they did not know was that the beacon had very specific criteria for who it would contact. It was built by a species that understood the universe's true nature. It only called the most successful apex predators in the local galactic cluster. Kethavar placed his hands on the beacon's control surface. The device hummed to life, its alien symbols glowing with cold light. "Send this message," he said. "We are a peaceful people facing extinction. Our worlds burn and our children die. We seek protectors, guardians who can save us from the machines that devour everything. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us." The beacon pulsed once, twice, then released a wave of energy that tore through the fabric of spacetime itself. The message raced across dimensions, seeking its intended targets. Far from Valathia Prime, near the edge of Earth's solar system, 3 massive ships were conducting war games in the shadow of Pluto. The Terran Dreadnought Corps had been testing new weapon systems, when every communication array on all 3 vessels suddenly screamed warnings. Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing tactical reports on the bridge of the TDS Mjolnir when her communications officer shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies, but the source is impossible." "Explain," Chen ordered, her gray eyes sharp with attention. She was a veteran of 30 years of space combat, and nothing should have been impossible anymore. "The signal is coming from another dimension, ma'am. Something is translating it into standard Terran as it comes through. The message claims to be from something called the Valathi Confederation. They're requesting immediate military assistance." Chen looked at the tactical display showing her fleet. The Mjolnir was a kilometer of advanced armor and weaponry, built to fight wars that could destroy star systems. Beside it hung the TDS Ragnarok, commanded by Captain Marcus Volkov, a man more machine than flesh after decades of cybernetic enhancement. The third ship, TDS Nemesis, was under Captain Elena Vasquez, a survivor of battles that had left entire planets as smoking ruins. These were not rescue ships. They were instruments of war, crewed by soldiers who had seen the worst the universe could offer. "Patch me through to both ships," Chen ordered. "All commanders to conference immediately." Within minutes, the 3 captains were connected across their ship's communication systems. Volkov appeared on screen first, his cybernetic implants glowing softly in the dim light of his bridge. Half his face was metal and circuits, the result of an explosion that had nearly killed him. Vasquez followed, her dark eyes holding the cold fury that had made her legendary among the fleet. "You've all seen the transmission," Chen began. "Analysis? The dimensional breach is real," Volkov reported, his voice carrying a mechanical edge from his vocal implants. "Whatever technology created it is beyond anything in our databases. The signal is definitely alien in origin. The translation matrix is sophisticated," Vasquez added. "It's not just converting language, it's adapting concepts. When they say protectors, the matrix is translating that as military force capable of defeating overwhelming odds. Meaning, they specifically want soldiers, not diplomats," Chen concluded. "The question is whether we respond. Regulations require us to investigate any dimensional breach," Volkov pointed out. "It could be a threat to Earth. And if they're really facing extinction, we have a moral obligation," Vasquez said quietly. She had seen too many worlds die to ignore a genuine plea for help. Chen nodded slowly. The Terran Dreadnought Corps existed to protect humanity and its allies from threats too large for regular military forces. But they had never received a call for help from another dimension. "Very well," she decided. "We investigate. But we go in ready for anything. These aliens might be peaceful, but whatever they're fighting clearly isn't." The three ships began powering their dimensional drive systems, technology that humanity had developed through decades of contact with beings from other realities. Most of those contacts had been hostile. The drives were designed to punch through the barriers between dimensions like bullets through paper. On Velithia Prime, Kethvar watched the beacon's indicators with growing hope. Something had answered their call. The energy pattern suggested 3 large objects were approaching through dimensional space. "Ambassador?" Thysol called out, her harmonic voice filled with relief. "The response signals indicate our salvation approaches." "The protectors come." But as the quantum sensors began to analyze the approaching objects, Thysol's harmonics shifted to confusion, then growing alarm. "Ambassador, these energy signatures are massive. The approaching vessels are each larger than our entire defense fleet." "Larger?" Kethavar moved to the sensor display. What he saw made his crystalline form darken with fear. The 3 objects tearing through dimensional space toward their system were not ships designed for protection or rescue. They were weapons of war, built by beings who understood violence in ways the Velathi never could. "What have we done?" Kethavar whispered, but it was too late. The dimensional rift was already forming at the edge of their system, and through it came the answer to their desperate plea. They had asked for protectors. They were about to discover what protectors looked like when they came from a world where everything was designed to kill everything else. The dimensional rift tore open like a wound in space itself. Reality screamed as 3 massive shapes pushed through from another universe. The Velathi sensors went blind from the energy feedback, then slowly came back online to reveal something that should not have existed. The TDS Mjolnir emerged first, its kilometer-long hull bristling with weapon systems that the Velathi computers could not even identify. The ship's armor was scarred from battles across a dozen star systems, each mark a story of violence that the peaceful aliens could not comprehend. Behind it came the Ragnarok, its hull modified with additional weapon mounts and sensor arrays that made it look like a mechanical predator. Finally, the Nemesis appeared, its sleek lines hiding firepower that could crack moons. On the bridge of the Mjolnir, Admiral Chen studied the readings from their new environment. "Status report. Dimensional transition successful," her navigation officer reported. "We are in an alien star system. Multiple artificial structures detected. One planet shows signs of advanced civilization. And massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system," her tactical officer added grimly. "Unknown configuration, but the power levels suggest hostile intent," Chen nodded. "The harvesters that the aliens had mentioned in their distress call. Communications attempt contact with the planet. Use standard first contact protocols. The transmission that reached Velithia Prime was processed through military translation software designed for interrogating captured enemies. Every peaceful Velathi phrase was interpreted as a potential threat assessment. When Ambassador Kethvar tried to welcome the newcomers, the human translation computers rendered his harmonic greeting as, "Identify your weapons capabilities and surrender procedures." "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "the aliens are demanding tactical intelligence and discussing surrender terms." Chen's expression hardened. Battle stations. We may have walked into a trap. On Valathia Prime, Kethvar listened to the translated response with growing horror. The protectors were demanding that the Valathi surrender their defensive information and prepare for occupation. The harmonic translation made the human words sound cold and threatening. They are not protectors, Thyssel whispered. They are conquerors, just like the machines. Meanwhile, aboard the Ragnarok, Captain Volkov was conducting his own analysis of the situation. His cybernetic implants processed data faster than any organic brain could manage. Interesting, he said to his tactical officer. The local civilization shows no significant military infrastructure. Their ships are designed for exploration and commerce, not warfare. Defenseless? The officer asked, completely. But look at these energy signatures from the outer system. Volkov highlighted the approaching harvester fleet on the tactical display. Those are military vessels. Advanced ones. The locals are caught between us and whatever is coming. On the Nemesis, Captain Vasquez was reaching similar conclusions. She had fought in enough wars to recognize the signs of a civilization under attack. The aliens who called us are not the threat, she told her bridge crew. They are the victims. She opened a channel to the other ships. Admiral, I believe we have misunderstood the situation. The dimensional beacon was a genuine distress call. These people are facing extinction. Chen considered this. Her own sensors were showing the same patterns that Vasquez had identified. Very well. Communications. Try again with diplomatic protocols instead of military ones. The second transmission was worse than the first. The diplomatic translation software, designed for negotiating with hostile powers, interpreted the Valathi responses as demands for tribute and submission. When Kethvar tried to explain about the approaching harvesters, the computers translated his warnings as threats about allies coming to destroy the human ships. Admiral, the communications officer reported, they are now threatening us with the approach of a large fleet. They claim these allies will destroy us if we do not comply with their demands. Chen looked at the tactical display. The unknown fleet was indeed approaching, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in Terran databases. All ships prepare for combat. We have 30 minutes before contact with unknown hostiles. On Valathia Prime, panic spread through the command center as they watched the 3 alien ships deploy weapon systems that defied understanding. The humans were preparing to fight both the harvesters and the Valathi. Everything had gone wrong. Try the beacon again, Kethvar ordered desperately. Perhaps we can recall them. The beacon only works once per dimensional frequency, Thyssel replied. We cannot send them back. As the harvester fleet approached the inner system, their true nature became apparent to the human ships. The enemy vessels were not clean military designs. They were grotesque amalgamations of different technologies, built from the remains of conquered civilizations. Each ship was a monument to suffering, decorated with the twisted metal and melted structures of dead worlds. My God, Chen whispered as the sensor reports came in. What are those things? Analysis suggests they are constructed from the remains of multiple species, her science officer reported. The hull configurations match no known design principles. It is as if they have taken pieces from dozens of different civilizations and merged them together. Aboard the Ragnarok, Volkov's cybernetic brain processed the tactical implications. These are not standard military vessels. They are scavengers, building their fleet from the corpses of their victims, the approaching force numbers in the hundreds. Captain Vasquez studied the harvester formation and felt a familiar cold anger building in her chest. She had seen this before, during the Centauri Wars. Ships built from the bones of conquered peoples displaying their victories like trophies. Admiral, she called over the communication channel. These are not just enemies. They are monsters. The lead harvester ship began broadcasting as it entered the system. The transmission was not in words but in sounds, screams and cries of terror from the beings they had captured and converted. The psychological warfare was designed to break the spirit of any defenders before the battle began. But instead of fear, the transmission awakened something darker in the human crews. These were soldiers who had fought across the galaxy to protect the innocent. They had seen worlds burn and civilizations fall. The sounds of torture and suffering did not frighten them. It made them furious. All ships, Admiral Chen broadcast, her voice cold as space itself. I am reassessing our mission parameters. The aliens who summoned us are under attack by hostiles engaged in systematic genocide. We are intervening. On Valathia Prime, Kethavar watched in amazement as the three human ships moved to position themselves between the Harvester fleet and the planet. The protectors they had summoned were not abandoning them. Instead, they were preparing to fight impossible odds to defend people they had never met. Admiral Chen, Kethavar broadcast, hoping the translation would work this time, "You do not understand. There are hundreds of them and only 3 of you. Please save yourselves." This time the translation worked perfectly. Chen's response came back clear and unmistakable. "Ambassador, you called for help, we came. Now you are under our protection whether you like it or not." For the first time in their peaceful history, the Valathi were about to witness what happened when apex predators from a death world decided to adopt someone as their own. The Harvester fleet filled the outer system like a plague of metal locusts. As they drew closer, the true horror of their nature became clear to both the humans and the Valathi. These were not simple machines or even traditional warships. They were floating monuments to conquest, each vessel a twisted fusion of technologies stolen from dozens of dead civilizations. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Mjolnir, studying the sensor readings with growing disgust. "Science officer, analysis of the enemy fleet composition. Admiral, it's unlike anything in our databases. Each ship appears to be built from the salvaged remains of multiple species vessels. The hull materials include crystalline matrices, similar to what we're detecting from the local population, metallic composites from at least 6 different technological bases, and organic components that our sensors cannot identify." "Organic components?" Chen's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Yes, ma'am. Life signs are detected throughout their fleet. But the patterns are wrong. The biological readings suggest conscious beings, but they are integrated into the ship systems in ways that should not be possible." On the Ragnarok, Captain Volkov's cybernetic implants were processing the tactical data at superhuman speed. What he discovered made even his mechanical parts seem to recoil in horror. "Admiral," he reported over the fleet channel, "I have identified the organic components. They are the crews of the ships these machines have captured. The Harvesters are using living beings as biological computers, keeping them conscious while forcing them to operate their own stolen vessels." The silence that followed was broken by Captain Vasquez from the Nemesis. Her voice carried the cold fury that had made her legendary. "They are using slaves. Living, thinking slaves forced to pilot the ships built from their own people's bones." As if to confirm this analysis, the lead Harvester vessel began broadcasting again. This time the transmission was more than screams. It was a parade of horrors, recordings from each world they had conquered. The voices of Valathi from the 17 destroyed systems cried out in harmonics of pure agony, begging for death that would never come. On Valathia Prime, Ambassador Kethavar's crystalline form darkened to near black as he heard the voices of his people who had been taken. "They keep them alive," he whispered. "All this time we thought they were simply destroying our worlds, but they take prisoners and torture them forever." The psychological warfare that had broken the spirits of dozens of species had an unexpected effect on the human crews. Instead of fear or despair, it awakened something primal and terrifying. These were soldiers from a world where survival meant becoming the ultimate predators. They had evolved not just to fight, but to protect their own with absolute ruthlessness. "Admiral," Captain Vasquez called over the communication channel. "Permission to activate Protocol 7. Chen hesitated. Protocol 7 was reserved for enemies who had crossed lines that could never be forgiven. It removed all restrictions on weapons usage and tactical decisions. It was authorization to commit to total war. "Granted," Chen replied. "All ships, Protocol 7 is now in effect. These are not enemy combatants. They are an infection that must be burned out completely." The Harvester fleet began to spread out as they entered the inner system. Their tactics were simple and effective. Ignore any military resistance and go straight for the civilian populations. They had learned that most species would surrender to save their people. The 3 human ships were positioned directly in their path. "They are attempting to bypass us," reported the tactical officer on the Mjolnir. "Fleet composition suggests they intend to ignore our presence and proceed directly to the inhabited planet." "Let them try," Chen said quietly. All ships prepared to demonstrate why that was a mistake. The Harvesters had encountered resistance before. They had fought the military forces of 17 different civilizations and absorbed their technologies after victory. But they had never encountered beings like humans. They had never faced a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to kill things bigger, stronger, and more numerous than themselves. The first harvester ships to reach the human defensive line simply tried to push through. They were used to enemies who would retreat when faced with overwhelming numbers. The Mjolnir's response was immediate and devastating. Relativistic kinetic penetrators launched from its main guns at significant fractions of light speed. The alien shields that had effortlessly deflected Velothi energy weapons were designed for elegant, sophisticated attacks. They were not built to stop chunks of matter moving fast enough to convert mass directly to energy on impact. The lead harvester ship simply ceased to exist, converted to expanding plasma in a fraction of a second. "First kill confirmed," reported the tactical officer unnecessarily. The explosion was visible to every sensor in the system. On Velothia Prime, Kethavar watched in amazement as the human weapons tore through harvester defenses like they were made of paper. "They're weapons," he said to Thisol. "How is this possible?" "The energy release from each impact is equivalent to a fusion bomb," Thisol replied, her harmonics carrying disbelief. "But they are not using explosives. They are simply throwing metal very, very fast." The Ragnarok's response was different but equally effective. Captain Volkov had always preferred subtlety to brute force. His ship released swarms of hunter-killer drones, each one the size of a fighter craft but controlled by artificial intelligence that could adapt to new threats in real time. The drones spread out like a living cloud, each one seeking individual targets. The harvesters tried to use their point defense systems, but the drones learned from each attack. Within minutes, the swarm had adapted to every defensive measure the enemy possessed. They began targeting specific ship systems, disabling engines and weapons with surgical precision. "Interesting," Volkov observed as his drones systematically dismantled a harvester cruiser. "Their adaptive capabilities are inferior to our autonomous systems. They rely too heavily on assimilated technology instead of developing original innovations." But it was the nemesis that truly demonstrated the difference between the two species' approaches to warfare. Captain Vasquez had loaded her torpedo tubes with quantum warheads, weapons that humanity had developed during its darkest wars. When the torpedoes detonated, they did not just destroy their targets. They temporarily destabilized local spacetime, causing the target vessels to simply stop existing in any meaningful sense. "Quantum torpedo impact confirmed," reported her weapons officer. "Target has been removed from local reality." The harvester fleet, which had never encountered serious resistance, suddenly found itself facing enemies that fought with weapons they could not understand or counter. But they had one advantage that had served them well against other species. They did not care about casualties. As their front line dissolved under human firepower, the harvesters began implementing desperate tactics. Ships rammed themselves into the human vessels at maximum acceleration. Others detonated their own fusion cores, trying to damage the defenders with suicide attacks. Most horrifically, they began targeting Velothi civilian ships that were still evacuating the planet, forcing the humans to split their attention between offense and defense. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "enemy vessels are targeting civilian evacuation ships. We cannot intercept all of them while maintaining our defensive line." Chen watched as harvester ships began chasing down the fleeing Velothi transports. Each one carried thousands of innocent beings. The mathematics were brutal. She could save the planet or the evacuation fleet, but not both. "Captain Volkov," she called over the communication channel. "I need options." The reply came immediately. "Admiral, I can ram the enemy flagship with the Ragnarok." Full acceleration impact with matter-antimatter charges set to detonate on contact. It will eliminate their command structure and create a gap in their formation. "That would be a suicide run, Captain." "Yes, Admiral, but it would save the civilians." Before Chen could respond, her science officer called out from his station. "Admiral, I have an alternative. All three ships could link their AI cores and implement Protocol Omega. We could fight them in both physical and digital space simultaneously." Chen's blood ran cold. Protocol Omega was theoretical, untested. It would merge the consciousness of the human crews with their ship AIs, creating a hybrid intelligence that could process information and react at superhuman speeds. But the procedure was irreversible. Anyone who underwent it would never be fully human again. "The risks?" she asked. "Unknown, Admiral. This would be the first field test. But if it works, we could coordinate our attacks with perfect precision while simultaneously hacking their ship systems. Chen looked at the tactical display. The Harvester fleet was closing on the civilian transports. In 30 minutes, thousands of Velothi would be dead or worse, converted into living components for Harvester ships. All ships, she announced, prepare for Protocol Omega implementation. We are going to show these machines what happens when they threaten people under human protection. The decision to implement Protocol Omega was not made lightly. Each of the 3 ship commanders understood what they were choosing. They would link their minds with the artificial intelligences that controlled their vessels, creating a hybrid consciousness that could think and react faster than any purely human or purely artificial intelligence could manage alone. All crews. This is Admiral Chen. The announcement echoed through all 3 ships. In 60 seconds, we will implement Protocol Omega. This procedure is irreversible. Anyone who wishes to evacuate to emergency pods may do so now. On the Mjolnir, not a single crew member moved toward the escape pods. Chief Engineer Martinez spoke for all of them when he said, "Admiral, we came here to help people who couldn't help themselves. That hasn't changed." On the Ragnarok, Captain Volkov's cybernetic implants were already interfacing with his ship's AI core. "Crew of the Ragnarok," he announced, "we have always been more machine than human. Today we become something new." Captain Vasquez's crew on the Nemesis had fought in more battles than any other ship in the fleet. They had seen entire civilizations fall to enemies who showed no mercy. "We swore an oath to protect the innocent," Vasquez told them. "Today we keep that oath no matter the cost." The 3 ship AIs began the synchronization process. These were not simple computers, but advanced artificial intelligences that had developed their own personalities over years of combat. The AI of the Mjolnir, called Athena, had always been tactical and precise. The Ragnarok's AI, called Fenrir, was aggressive and adaptive. The Nemesis's AI, called Fury, was cold and calculating. As the human consciousness began to merge with the artificial minds, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the humans being absorbed into the machine intelligence, or the AIs being overwhelmed by human emotion, they formed something entirely new. The merged consciousness retained human creativity and determination while gaining the processing, speed and logical precision of artificial intelligence. Admiral Chen felt her awareness expand across all 3 ships simultaneously. She could feel the thoughts of Captains Volkov and Vasquez as if they were her own. The tactical situation became crystal clear. Every enemy ship's position and movement pattern visible in perfect detail. "Protocol Omega successful," she announced, though her voice now carried harmonic undertones that had not been there before. All ships engaged the enemy. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Velothi had ever witnessed. The 3 human ships moved with perfect coordination, as if they were controlled by a single mind. The Mjolnir's kinetic weapons fired in precise patterns, each shot calculated to drive enemy ships into the firing arcs of the other vessels. The Ragnarok's drone swarms operated with inhuman efficiency, each unit coordinating with thousands of others in complex attack patterns. The Nemesis's quantum torpedoes struck targets that had been herded into position by the other ships' attacks. But the Harvesters had their own advantages. They had absorbed the technologies of 17 different civilizations, and they began adapting to the human tactics faster than expected. Some ships deployed energy shields that could deflect the kinetic penetrators. Others released their own drone swarms to counter the Ragnarok's attack pattern. Most dangerously, they began coordinating their attacks through their enslaved biological components, using the creativity of living minds to counter the humans' tactical advantages. "They are learning," Captain Volkov observed. His consciousness split between his physical body and the Ragnarok's computer core. The biological components are providing them with unpredictable tactical decisions. "Then we teach them something new," Admiral Chen replied. Through the merged consciousness, she could feel the pain of the enslaved beings in the Harvester ships. They were not willing participants but prisoners forced to fight against their will. "Fenrir, can you access their communication systems?" The Ragnarok's AI responded immediately. "Affirmative. Their network security is based on mechanical protocols. They did not anticipate digital intrusion. What happened next changed the entire nature of the battle. Instead of simply destroying the Harvester ships, the humans began hacking into their communication networks. They sent a simple message to the enslaved biological components. We are here to help. When we target your ship, abandon the control systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the Harvester fleet, the enslaved crews began sabotaging their own vessels. Ships that had been operating with perfect efficiency suddenly began making tactical errors. Weapon systems failed at critical moments. Navigation computers sent ships on collision courses with their own allies. The slaves are revolting, Captain Vasquez observed with grim satisfaction. They have been waiting for someone to give them hope. But the Harvester collective intelligence recognized the threat and responded with typical ruthlessness. Instead of trying to regain control of their ships, they began detonating them. If they could not use their slaves, they would at least deny them to the enemy. Throughout the fleet, fusion cores began overloading. They are going to destroy their own ships rather than lose control, Volkov warned. Thousands of enslaved beings will die. Admiral Chen made a decision that would have been impossible for a purely human or purely artificial intelligence. Using the combined processing power of all three ship AIs, she began calculating transport coordinates for every enslaved being in the Harvester fleet. It was a task that required monitoring thousands of individual life signs while predicting the exact moment each ship would explode. All ships, prepare for massive transport operation, she announced. We are going to save as many as we can. The teleporter systems on all three ships began working at maximum capacity. Just as each Harvester ship reached critical overload, the human ships transported the enslaved crews directly into their own cargo bays. It was a desperate race against time, made possible only by the superhuman coordination of the merged consciousness. The explosions that followed lit up the entire star system. The Harvesters had chosen to destroy themselves rather than allow their slaves to escape, but they had failed. Nearly 10,000 enslaved beings from dozens of different species materialized in the cargo holds of the human ships, freed for the first time in decades. On Valathia Prime, Ambassador Kethavar watched in amazement as the enemy fleet simply ceased to exist. They saved them, he whispered to Thysol. They saved the prisoners. But the humans had paid a price for their victory. The Protocol Omega merger had been successful, but it was indeed irreversible. Admiral Chen could feel that she was no longer entirely human. Her thoughts moved too fast, processed too much information. She was aware of every system on all three ships simultaneously. The same was true for Captains Volkov and Vasquez. They had become something new, something that was part human and part machine. Admiral, the science officer reported, though his voice now carried the same harmonic undertones as hers. The merger is stabilizing. We are not losing our humanity, but we are definitely no longer purely human. Chen nodded, accepting what they had become. Status of the rescued prisoners? Medical teams are attending to them now. Many will require extensive rehabilitation, but they will survive. We have representatives from at least 15 different species, including several hundred Valathi from the destroyed worlds. As the immediate threat ended, the three ships moved toward Valathia Prime. But they were no longer the same vessels that had answered the distress call. They were something new, crewed by beings who had chosen to sacrifice their pure humanity to protect others. The Harvesters were gone, but the victory had transformed everyone involved. The question now was what would come next. The great crystal spires of Valathia Prime rang with harmonics of joy for the first time in months. The Harvester fleet was gone, destroyed or scattered to the void. But as the three human ships approached the planet, Ambassador Kethavar could see that victory had come at a cost. The vessels that had saved his people were changed, their energy signatures different from when they had first arrived. Admiral Chen, Kethavar transmitted to the Mjolnir, our sensors indicate that you and your crews have undergone some kind of transformation. Are you well? The response came in a voice that was recognizably Admiral Chen's, but carried new harmonics that resonated strangely with Valathi hearing. We are well, Ambassador, though we are no longer entirely what we were when we arrived. The process required to defeat the Harvesters has changed us permanently. Changed how? We have merged our consciousness with our ship AIs. We are now hybrid beings, part human and part artificial intelligence. We think faster, process more information, but we are still committed to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. On the surface of Valathia Prime, crowds gathered to watch the human ships descend through the atmosphere. The vessels were scarred from battle, their hulls marked by weapons that the Valathi had never imagined. But they came not as conquerors, but as protectors who had risked everything to save a people they had never met. The rescued prisoners from the harvester ships were the first to be transported to the surface. Beings from 15 different species emerged from the transport bays, many seeing sunlight for the first time in decades. Among them were several hundred Velothi who had been presumed dead when their worlds fell to the machines. Thisal wept harmonics of pure joy as she was reunited with her sister, who had been captured during the fall of Velothia 7. "I thought you were dead," she sang in the traditional Velothi greeting. "I was," her sister replied. "The machines kept us alive but made us wish for death. The humans saved us from that. They risked everything to free us from our torment." As the immediate celebrations continued, practical matters demanded attention. The 3 human ships were severely damaged from the battle, and their crews needed medical attention that Velothi technology was not equipped to provide. More importantly, the hybrid consciousness created by Protocol Omega was still adapting to its new state of being. Admiral Chen, Captain Volkov, and Captain Vasquez met in person for the first time since the merger. They were still recognizably human, but their eyes held depths that had not been there before, and their movements carried the precise efficiency of artificial intelligence. "How do you feel?" Chen asked the others. "Different," Vasquez replied honestly. "I can process tactical information at speeds that should be impossible for organic brains. But I still feel anger at injustice, still feel protective of innocent people. The merger enhanced us without removing our humanity." Volkov nodded, his cybernetic implants now seamlessly integrated with the AI components of his consciousness. "We have become something new. Not human, not artificial, but something that combines the best aspects of both." Their conversation was interrupted by Ambassador Kethvar, who approached with careful respect. "Admirals, captains, my people wish to express their gratitude. You came when we called for help, and you saved us when we could not save ourselves. How can we repay such a debt?" Chen considered the question. The human ships were damaged and far from home. The crews were transformed in ways that would make returning to normal human society difficult. But more than that, she realized that they had found a purpose that transcended their original mission. "Ambassador," she said finally, "we did not come here seeking payment. We came because you needed help. But if you truly wish to repay us, we have a proposal. Anything within our power to grant. Form an alliance with us. Not as subjects or clients, but as partners. The universe is not the peaceful place your people believed it to be. There are other threats out there, other harvesters, other species that prey on the innocent. Together we can protect them." Kethavar's crystalline form shimmered with consideration. "You are asking us to abandon our peaceful ways and learn the arts of war." "No," Vasquez interjected. "We are asking you to learn to defend yourselves and others. There is a difference between becoming warlike and becoming capable of protection." The proposal sparked intense debate among the Velothi. For generations, they had built their civilization on the principle that violence was never the answer. But the Harvester invasion had taught them that sometimes violence was the only thing that could stop greater violence. 3 days later, the Velothi Council reached their decision. They would form an alliance with the humans, but on specific terms. Some Velothi would volunteer to serve aboard the human ships, learning their technologies and methods. In exchange, human advisors would help the Confederation develop defensive capabilities based on their own harmonic technologies. The first Velothi volunteers were young beings who had lost their worlds to the harvesters. They understood the necessity of strength in ways their elders could not. Among them was Thisal, who requested assignment to the Mjolnir's communication department. "Why do you wish to serve with us?" Admiral Chen asked during her interview. "Because you showed me that protection and destruction are not the same thing," Thisal replied. "You could have destroyed the harvester fleet and left the prisoners to die. Instead, you found a way to save both my people and the enslaved beings from other worlds. I want to learn how to make those kinds of choices." The integration was not without challenges. Velothi technology was based on harmonic resonance and crystalline matrices, while human technology relied on electromagnetic fields and metallic alloys. But the hybrid consciousness of the ship commanders could process both types of systems simultaneously, finding ways to combine them that neither species could have discovered alone. The first prototype hybrid ship was completed 6 months later. It combined Velothi harmonic shielding with human weapon systems, creating a vessel that could defend itself without sacrificing the artistic beauty that was central to Velothi culture. The ship was named the Unity, and it became the flagship of the new combined fleet. As the alliance grew stronger, reports began coming in from other sectors of space. The Harvesters had not been unique. Other predator species were attacking peaceful civilizations throughout the galaxy. Pirates raided trading routes. Machine intelligences consumed entire star systems for raw materials. The universe was full of threats that required people willing to stand up and fight. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Mjolnir, watching as the combined fleet conducted training exercises in the space around Velothia Prime. Human ships flew alongside Velothi vessels, their crews working together with an efficiency that would have been impossible before the merger. The hybrid consciousness allowed for coordination that transcended the limitations of either species alone. Admiral, Thysol reported from her station. We are receiving a distress call on emergency frequencies. The transmission is from the Andreth Republic. They claim to be under attack by slavers. Chen smiled, though the expression carried undertones that were both human and artificial. Signal the fleet. All ships prepare for dimensional transit. We have work to do. All ships report ready, Admiral, Vasquez called from the Nemesis. Combined fleet standing by for departure. The Andreth Republic is 3 days away at maximum speed, Volkov added from the Ragnarok. Shall we proceed? Chen looked around the bridge at her mixed crew of humans and Velothi, beings who had chosen to stand together against the darkness between the stars. They were no longer purely human or purely alien, but something new that combined the best qualities of both species. Yes, she said simply. We go. Another call for help has been received, and we will answer it. The combined fleet vanished into dimensional space, leaving behind the safety of Velothia Prime to face whatever threats awaited in the void. They were protectors now, guardians who had chosen to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Behind them, on the crystal spires of Velothia Prime, children sang harmonics of stories about the day the protectors came from another dimension. They sang of beings who had sacrificed their own nature to save others, and who had taught an entire civilization that sometimes the greatest act of peace was being prepared for war. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of beings willing to help those in need, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, predators learned to fear the approach of ships that carried the combined fury and compassion of two species who had decided that some things were worth fighting for,